You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. Vast vacant roads have always unsettled me. Those endless stretches of tarmac binding desolate places. Yet, I drove one, compelled by a morbid curiosity, a need to witness the inheritance myself. It was the house of my estranged great-uncle, Silas, a man whose existence was merely a footnote in faded family lore. No calls, no letters, just whispers. Now, inexplicably, his final property was mine. They said it stood sequestered deep in the countryside, swallowed by trees that strangled the sunlight, miles from any neighbor adrift in silence. The car tires crunched on the gravel drive as twilight bled into the late afternoon sky. I stepped out, confronted by a porch whose paint flaked away like old regrets. Windows stared blankly, veiled by curtains thick as secrets. The front door groaned its protest as I entered, my soul sprinting accusations onto the dust-thick floorboards. An immediate strangeness permeated the air, heavy with the scent of decaying paper and stagnant time. Yet the lights flickered to life at my touch, casting a jaundiced pall over the entrance hall. I let my small valise fall, taking a moment to orient myself within the gloom. A staircase spiraled upwards. A narrow corridor snaked towards the house's shadowed rear. The living room furniture slumped in exhaustion. A sofa draped in faded tapestry. A coffee table marred by spectral water rings. A towering bookshelf leaning precariously. My gaze snagged on peculiar symbols, gouged into the banister's wood, alien and unsettling, though I dismissed them initially as mere eccentricities. My intentions were straightforward. A few days exploring, salvaging anything of value or intrigue, then deciding the property's fate. This pragmatic resolve dissolved upon reaching the second floor. Dust motes danced furiously in the air disturbed by my ascent up the creaking stairs, catching in my throat. 3 bedrooms branched off the landing, alongside a bathroom. 2 chambers were unremarkable repositories of neglect. Bare mattresses stained with time, empty dressers, the same stale odor. The third remained stubbornly locked. The key would surface eventually, I reasoned, moving on. But then, another door, tucked away at the hallway's terminus. Smaller, unassuming, like a linen closet. Yet upon approach, I saw it guarded the attic ascent. A formidable padlock clamped it shut. An oddity. Who secures an attic with such vehemence? The following day became a scavenger hunt for the missing key. Drawers yielded dust and dead insects. Boxes disgorged brittle papers. Cabinets offered only emptiness. I even checked beneath the sagging mattresses. Amidst the debris, I found cryptic notes in Silas's spidery hand. They spoke of spirits, archaic rites, fragmented warnings about something that demanded containment, sealing, comprehension eluded me. But a disquiet settled deep in my gut. By late afternoon, defeated, I abandoned the search. The padlock would yield to force. 3 sharp impacts with a crowbar. A screech of tortured metal, and the lock sprang apart. The attic door sighed open, releasing a puff of chill, ancient air against my face. The attic stairs protested each footfall, thin wood groaning beneath my weight. Mildew and dust formed a cloying perfume in the stagnant air. Reaching the top, I beheld a cavern of forgotten things. Furniture shrouded in pale sheets like specters. A skeletal bed frame canted against the far wall, dilapidated boxes spilling their secrets. A crumpled rug lying near the center. A single naked bulb cast everything in shades of weary gray. I moved through the space, senses straining for anything worthwhile. Dust tickled my nostrils, made my eyes water. Junk mostly, but the rug. It wasn't merely crumpled. It looked deliberately displaced, shoved aside. Something about the exposed floorboards beneath drew my attention. Closer inspection revealed the faint outline of a trapdoor, recessed into the floor. The rug hadn't just slipped, it had concealed. Crouching, I traced the wooden frame with my fingertips. A simple latch secured it, rusted but yielding. I pried it open with some effort, scraping my knuckles, a moment's resistance. Then it swung inwards with a low groan, exhaling an odor of damp earth and cold stone. My flashlight beam sliced into the darkness below, illuminating a short, rickety wooden ladder descending into a confined space. Not a room, precisely, but more than mere storage. I lowered myself gingerly, the ladder swaying precariously. My feet met a cold, hard surface. Stone. The air here was denser, colder. Turning, my light found what could only be described as a makeshift altar. A rough-hewn table, splintered and crude, bearing desiccated candles melted into grotesque shapes, and several earthenware bowls. I brushed my hand across the tabletop, feeling shallow grooves carved into the wood. Patterns I didn't recognize. Symbols that felt viscerally wrong. A fine film of dust coated everything, attesting to long neglect. The stone walls surrounding this cramped chamber were a canvas of frantic scribbles. Notes, diagrams, sigils. Some phrases were in English, stark pronouncements about spirits of the earth, appeasement, and binding. Others were in a script entirely foreign. My flashlight beam stuttered. A knot tightened in my stomach. The implications were obscure, yet they radiated a profound sense of wrongness. My pulse quickened. Sweat prickled the back of my neck. Silas, involved in this? Perhaps 10 minutes I lingered, probing the oppressive confines. Beneath the altar rested a small wooden box. Inside lay a folded cloth marked with more arcane symbols and a bundle of brittle, dried herbs. The scent was sharp, pungent, like exotic spices, but with an underlying feral note. I closed the box, backing away. The inscribed walls felt like intrusions into a fevered mind, a private obsession laid bare. A tremor started in my hands. Escape became an imperative. I scrambled back up the ladder, slammed the trapdoor shut, and wrestled the rug back into place, obscuring the hidden descent. I wouldn't return. It felt profane. Just a bizarre hobby, I told myself. Yet the unease clung like a shroud. That night, sleep offered little refuge in one of the upstairs bedrooms. The mattress was a landscape of lumps. The linens smelled of time and disuse, but it was better than the downstairs sofa. Wind sighed around the eaves. A faucet in the bathroom wept a slow, steady rhythm. Around midnight, a sound jolted me awake. Footsteps directly overhead. Slow, deliberate treads crossing the attic floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lay rigid, straining to hear, until silence descended again, heavier and more menacing than the sound itself. My mouth was parchment dry, forced shallow breaths. The house settling, I rationalized. Or raccoons, squirrels, anything but the alternative. Morning found me taut with residual fear, attempting normalcy through mundane tasks. Tidying the living room, stacking Silas's decaying books, wiping grime from surfaces. My eyes kept darting ceilingward. The memory of the trapdoor was a physical weight in my stomach. Lunch was a can of soup, heated on the ancient stove, the silence of the house amplifying the hiss of the gas flame. The day unfolded without further incident, allowing a fragile sense of calm to return. It shattered that night. The footsteps resumed. A faint creak, tentative, exploratory. A pause, another step. Then two more, rhythmic, unhurried, my chest constricted. Cold perspiration bloomed beneath my shirt. Bolting upright in bed, I fumbled for the lamp, bathing the room in weak light. I listened, ears straining. The pace remained constant, a measured crossing from one side of the attic to the other. Call the authorities. On what grounds? A locked attic, breached by me, now apparently host to. What? No forced entry was possible. I rose, flashlight clutched like a talisman, and crept into the hallway. The attic door remained closed, its violated padlock hanging uselessly. I stood before it, the urge to wrench it open, warring with a visceral wave of nausea. I couldn't. Listening to those slow, implacable steps overhead, a chilling thought surfaced. It knew I was there. Then, abrupt silence. I retreated shivering to the dubious safety of the bedroom. Sleep a distant memory. Dawn arrived grey and unwelcome. A stiff neck, a pervasive sense of dread. In the kitchen, cradling a mug of instant coffee, I resolved to investigate the attic in daylight. An animal, trapped perhaps, logical, sensible. Yet the knot in my stomach tightened, rejecting the explanation. Around noon, armed with a flashlight and a heavy wrench for courage, I ascended again. I pushed open the attic door. The familiar groan of hinges, the stale breath of dust and decay. I climbed the precarious stairs, sweeping the light across the shadowed space. Everything appeared untouched. The shrouded furniture, the scattered boxes, the rug concealing its secret. Silence reigned. No scurrying, no dripping, just the sound of my own ragged breathing. Heart thudding against my ribs, I advanced and pulled the rug aside. The trapdoor lay undisturbed. Hesitantly, I lifted it, directing the flashlight's beam into the subterranean chamber. Stone walls, the crude altar, the cryptic inscriptions, all exactly as before. Nothing seemed amiss. I swallowed, descended halfway down the ladder, peering intently into the gloom. The space was utterly still. A profound chill radiated from the stones. I climbed back up as I reached to close the trapdoor. My gaze fell upon the dusty floor near the rug. Footprints. Not mine. My tracks led directly from the stairs to the opening. These were different. Fainter, smaller, tracing a meandering path, circling the area above the hidden room. Indisputable, unexplained. Panic seized me, a cold fist clenching around my lungs. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a stack of forgotten cartons. The flashlight clattered to the floor, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. Snatching it up, I grabbed the rug. flung it haphazardly back over the trapdoor and fled down the stairs, pulling the attic door shut behind me. I leaned against the hallway wall, gasping for breath, hands trembling uncontrollably. Leave. I had to leave. Yet a morbid fascination warred with my fear, a perverse curiosity about Silas's dark pursuits, and beneath that, something else. A subtle, insistent pull, urging me back down into that cold stone space. The sensation made my skin crawl. The remainder of the day I spent outdoors, wandering the overgrown grounds, letting the weak sun warm my face, trying to dispel the encroaching dread. But the image of those inexplicable footprints remained burned onto my retinas. Evening descended, and with it a renewed tension. I refused an early retreat to bed, choosing instead the flickering, distorted images on a living room television, the reception atrocious. Around midnight they began again. The footsteps. A prickling sensation crawled up my spine. I rose, pacing the confines of the living room, torn between a reckless urge to confront whatever resided above and paralyzing terror. The steps ceased, then resumed near 1 a.m., louder now, more insistent, impossible to ignore. Flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, I hurried upstairs. Reaching the landing, I froze. The attic door stood wide open, gaping into the shadows. I hadn't left it that way. My heart hammered, sweat beaded on my forehead. I edged closer, the air growing perceptibly colder. The narrow stairs, ascending into darkness, were fully exposed. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm me, I began to climb, placing each foot with deliberate slowness. The attic was plunged into deeper darkness than before. The single bulb was extinguished. My flashlight carved arcs through the gloom. The shrouded furniture loomed like silent observers. The rug lay violently pulled back. The trapdoor yawned open. Steel nerves I didn't know I possessed propelled me forward. I aimed the light down into the pit. Ladder, altar, scribbled walls, all present, but now one of the earthenware bowls lay on the stone floor below, overturned. A soft, dry scraping sound echoed up from the darkness, like stone dragging against stone. I held my breath, muscles locked, legs threatening to buckle. I swept the light frantically around the confined space below. Nothing visible. The thought of descending sent a wave of revulsion through me. My instincts screamed retreat. Backing away slowly, I heard a distinct creak directly behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam trembling violently. Empty air, yet the pressure, the palpable sense of presence, was undeniable. My scalp tingled. I retreated towards the attic stairs, my chest so tight I could barely draw breath. One final sound drifted up from the pit. A soft, furtive rustling, then absolute silence descended once more. I stumbled down the stairs, leaving the attic door agape. I didn't care. I fled into the bedroom, slammed and locked the door, collapsing onto the bed. My hands shook uncontrollably. My imagination populated the hallway outside with indistinct shapes gliding towards my door. The night stretched into an eternity of hyper-vigilant waiting. Back pressed against the wall, eyes fixed on the doorknob. Morning light brought no relief, only grim resolution. Downstairs, pouring a glass of water with unsteady hands, I knew I couldn't endure another hour in this house. Silas's legacy, whatever haunted that attic space, was not mine to confront. I packed my valise with frantic haste, keys in hand, ready to flee. I heard it. 3 slow, distinct creaks emanating from the ceiling directly above the hallway. My shoulders locked. I looked up. The house held its breath. My mind flashed to the hidden chamber, the altar, the frantic inscriptions. It felt incomplete, like a ritual interrupted, waiting for me to resume what Silas had begun. My heart accelerated, pounding painfully against my ribs. I stood frozen, breath coming in ragged gasps, staring at the plaster ceiling. The weight of that expectation was suffocating. I couldn't bear it. I would not go back down there. I bolted from the house. No backward glance at the gaping attic door, no thought for what might linger within. Only the certainty that something resided there, patient, expectant, wanting me to finish a task I never understood, never chose. Reaching the car, I hurled the valise into the back, ignition catching on the first try. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I reversed down the gravel drive, away from the house brooding amongst the trees. The deed remains in my possession, a toxic document. Perhaps I'll sell the place sight unseen. Perhaps I'll simply let it decay, the attic door eternally open, the trapdoor concealed beneath its dusty shroud. Silas's secrets remain his. I refuse to delve deeper. Yet, even now, miles and days removed, closing my eyes conjures the image of those faint footprints in the dust. I hear the slow measured tread on the attic floorboards, and I feel it, that insidious pull, a silent summons from the darkness beneath the house. I won't return. I can't. I'm finished with it. But the declaration feels hollow. My skin crawls with the chilling certainty that it is not finished with me. It waits, and its presence lingers, an invisible stain upon my peace. The cyclops eye of the antique instant camera felt ponderous in Elias's grip, its bakelite shell cool and strangely resonant against his palm. He'd unearthed it from the sediment of memory and mothballs in his grandmother's attic, a forgotten oracle from a time before pixels. Impulse, sharp and unexpected, had prompted him to bring it on this solitary pilgrimage into the brooding emerald depths of the coastal rainforest. He hadn't known, couldn't have guessed, this obsolete contraption, this charming fossil, would peel back the very skin of the world he thought he knew. The day unfurled as hikes often do. An early departure, missed ghosting between colossal cedars as Elias traced the serpentine path. Birdsong stitched the silence. Unseen creatures rustled the undergrowth, the air, thick with the incense of pine resin and sodden earth, felt ancient, primeval. Photography seemed the only proper response. He documented the forest's textures, the intricate labyrinth of bark on a fallen giant, a sudden bloom of scarlet fungi erupting from decay, sunlight spearing the dense canopy like a celestial announcement. Mundane wonders, captured one square at a time. Then came the clearing, a sun-dappled pause in the relentless woods, and the shift from mundane to monstrously strange. As Elias framed the tranquil scene, the viewfinder presented an anomaly. There, poised at the clearing's distant fringe, stood a shape. Impossibly slender, unnervingly tall, its silhouette seeming to bleed into the surrounding shadows like watercolor on damp paper. Motionless. Elias blinked, lowering the camera. Nothing. Just ferns and moss-draped stillness, precisely as before. A flicker of confusion, perhaps a trick of the light. He lifted the device again. It reappeared. The figure, stark within the viewfinder's frame, yet utterly absent from the world perceived by his unaided eyes. A tremor started in his chest, his pulse accelerating. What phantom was this? A mechanical ghost in the aged camera? Some bizarre optical artifact? Or was he gazing through a fissure? A hairline crack in the veneer of reality? Fingers unsteady, slick with sudden sweat, he depressed the shutter. The camera issued its characteristic whirring sigh, a mechanical exhalation, before ejecting a pale square. He agitated it gently, impatience gnawing at him as the alchemy within the film began its slow work. An image swam into view. The clearing, rendered in muted tones, faithful to his memory but for one terrifying detail. The figure occupied the space, its elongated limbs and smooth, featureless head radiating an aura that sunk icicles into his marrow. He tore his gaze from the photograph, frantically scanning the clearing once more. Emptiness greeted him. Only trees, only undergrowth, only the familiar silence of the woods. No trace of the being he now held, captured in his hand. Fear warred with a burgeoning, insatiable curiosity. He raised the camera again, a technological divining rod, sweeping it slowly across the dense tapestry of the forest. Through its singular eye, he saw them. More figures, lurking behind ancient trunks, standing brazenly in dappled sunlight, yet invisible beyond the lens. They populated this space, a hidden nation, teeming just beyond human perception. The next hour became a fevered documentation. Each photograph peeled back another layer, revealing more of this clandestine dimension. Entities that defied easy categorization. Structures that twisted geometry into impossible knots between the trees. Even shimmering thresholds that hinted at passages to realities he couldn't fathom. The sun, now a molten smear near the horizon, cast long, disorienting shadows. Elias realized, with a jolt of cold dread, he was profoundly lost. The path had vanished. The woods around him felt different, darker, denser, imbued with an older, wilder spirit. Panic began its insidious crawl. It was then he heard it. A low, resonant humming, intricate and melodic, weaving through the trees. It wasn't bird or beast. It was sublime, hypnotic, pulling at something deep within him. Compelled, unthinking, he moved towards the source, pushing through a thick curtain of ferns into another, unexpected clearing. Here, stone monoliths stood sentinel in a rough circle, their surfaces alive with serpentine carvings that seemed to writhe just outside his direct focus. And at the circle's heart emanated the captivating hum. It was one of the entities he'd been photographing, yet distinct. Larger, its form coalescing with greater definition, less ethereal than the others. As he watched, transfixed, it pivoted towards him. He felt a gaze, immense and ancient, though no eyes were visible on its smooth facade. Instinctively, the camera came up, his finger finding the shutter. The being inclined its head, a gesture unnervingly, profoundly familiar. Then, astonishingly, it communicated. Not with sound, but with thought impressed directly onto his consciousness. "You perceive us." The silent voice resonated within his skull. "You have breached the threshold." His own voice, when he found it, was a ragged whisper. What are you?" The entity's form shimmered like distant heat haze distorting the air. "We are the threshold dwellers," it conveyed. "Neither wholly here nor entirely elsewhere. We inhabit the seams, the spaces between your reality and the countless others." His mind struggled, a stunned silence before the impossible. "Why can I see you? Only now? Only through this? The instrument you carry." Its attention seemed to focus on the camera. "It originates from a time when the partitions between worlds were more permeable. Its lens offers a glimpse into our domain." Elias looked down at the Polaroid, this accidental key, then back at the being. "Are you dangerous?" A sensation bloomed in his mind, complex and layered, like wind rustling through a million leaves. Amusement, he realized with a start. "No more perilous than your own species," the thought voice replied. "We have existed alongside you across millennia, unseen, untroubled. But your perception changes the equation." A new chill traced his spine, colder than the evening air. "Changes how?" The entity's form began to waver, its edges blurring, losing cohesion. "The threshold has been breached." Its mental signature faded. "The boundaries fray. What was concealed may soon stand revealed to all." "Wait!" Elias cried out, the words swallowed by the sudden silence. The being was gone. The stone circle, the monoliths, vanished. He stood alone in an unremarkable clearing, the forest returning to its familiar, inscrutable state. Yet, clutched in his hand was the undeniable proof. A stack of instant photographs, each a postcard from a world next door. Guided by an instinct he couldn't name, he found his way back to the marked trail as twilight deepened into night. He knew, with unshakable certainty, that his life was now cleaved into a before and an after. The following days and weeks were consumed by the images, scrutinizing every alien detail. He delved into obscure folklore, ancient myths, finding unsettling resonances, fragmented echoes of the threshold dwellers in forgotten tales across cultures. He tried, repeatedly, to relocate that specific clearing, that circle of stones, but the forest guarded its secrets well. It was never found again. The Polaroid camera now rests on his desk, a tangible link, a constant, quiet testament to the day the world cracked open. Sometimes in the deep solitude of night, he lifts it, aiming its cyclopean lens into the shadows of his own room, and sometimes, fleetingly, a flicker of movement, an impossible silhouette, registers at the very edge of the frame. He doesn't know what the future holds, what implications ripple outward from a weakening veil between realities. He only knows this: existence is infinitely stranger, more layered, more astonishing than he had ever conceived. And somewhere, just beyond sight, in the luminous gaps between what is and what seems to be, the threshold dwellers watch and wait, perhaps, for the day concealment is no longer an option. As for Elias, he has become something else, a custodian of an impossible truth, a silent witness. Whether he will ever divulge his discovery remains uncertain. perhaps humanity isn't prepared. Or perhaps, as the boundaries continue to soften, awareness will dawn regardless of readiness. Until then, he watches, camera near, prepared to document the encroaching unknown. Because once you've peered beyond the veil, retreat is impossible. The world is amplified, richer, and undeniably, potentially more perilous. But he wouldn't trade the knowledge. Few, after all, can claim to have photographed the unseen, to have captured proof of the spaces in between. A distant diner sign, sputtering neon against the oppressive dark, offered its meager pulse like a fragile promise on this desolate artery of highway. Hours bled into one another, the asphalt ribbon spooling endlessly ahead, leaving my vision blurred and stinging. As my sedan crunched onto the gravel of the near-vacant lot, a solitary shape detached itself from the roadside gloom, thumb stark against the night. Prudence screamed caution, yet some contrary impulse slowed the car. A choice, seemingly small, that would unravel the night into a labyrinth of terror I could never have conceived. I idled beside the hitchhiker, gaunt, tall, draped in clothes that whispered of better times and long miles, a tangled beard obscuring his jawline. The window descended, admitting a miasma of old sweat and stale smoke. Destination, my voice, aiming for nonchalance, fell thin in the heavy air. His gaze flickered, a nervous bird trapped in a cage, before landing on me. Just down the road, Silas. A discordant note chimed somewhere deep inside me, a warning bell muffled by exhaustion. This hour, this isolation, leaving him felt wrong. Get in, I offered, the click of the unlocking passenger door unnaturally loud. Leo. Silas folded himself into the seat, a battered backpack hugged to his ribs like a shield. Pulling back onto the tarmac, I caught the tremor in his hands, the slight, uncontrollable vibration. All right there, I risked glancing sideways. A jerky nod. Yeah, cold. The lie hung, palpable, between us. I let it settle. Miles unspooled in a silence that grew viscous, clinging. My earlier benevolence curdled into a cold knot of regret. So, I ventured, needing to puncture the quietude. What has you out traveling at this hour? Silas went rigid, a statue carved from tension. Just getting clear. Clear of what? No answer. He stared forward, fingers tapping a frantic, arrhythmic beat against the worn canvas of his back. The odometer clicked over, each mile seeming to amplify his agitation. His eyes kept snagging on the rearview mirror, scanning the darkness behind us, as if expecting phantoms to coalesce from the void. Just as I resolved to deposit him at the next cluster of lights, any town, anywhere, his voice emerged, barely a disturbance in the air. You need to help me, he breathed, a desperate thread of sound. They're coming for me. A glacial trickle traced its way down my spine. Who? Silas's eyes were huge, reflecting the dashboard lights like dark pools of fear. The ones I borrowed from. Didn't mean it, honest, just desperate. But they know. They want me gone. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Borrowed what? He eased the backpack zipper down just enough. A glimpse. Banded stacks of currency. The cold glint of jewels. My pulse hammered against my ribs. God Almighty, I muttered. You brought that into my car? Sorry, Silas stammered, words tumbling over each other. Nowhere else to go. Just help me get away. As if summoned by his plea, twin beams ignited in the rear-view mirror, swelling with predatory speed. Oh, no, Silas moaned, a low thrum of despair. It's them. Found me. My foot instinctively crushed the accelerator. The engine whined in protest. What vortex had I steered into? The lights behind us ballooned, resolving into the menacing silhouette of a large SUV. Who are these people, Silas? I demanded, wrestling the wheel through a sudden curve. Bad, he whimpered. The kind that erase problems. Permanently. The SUV filled the mirror, its high beams searing through the cabin, bleaching the interior harsh white. Two figures, indistinct behind the glare. Then impact. A brutal shove from behind sent us skidding, tires screaming on the pavement. I fought for control, the wheel slippery in my sweating palms. Silas cried out, clutching his pack as if it were a life raft. What the hell do they want? I yelled over the engine's roar, straightening our trajectory. Everything, Silas said, his voice hollowed out by terror. The cash, the stones, and me, silenced. Another impact, harder this time, buckling metal protesting with a sickening groan. We couldn't outrun this beast. Ahead, a narrow track snaked off into a dense stand of trees. A desperate gamble. Without conscious thought, I wrenched the wheel right, plunging us off the highway and onto the rutted dirt path. Branches lashed the windshield like angry claws as we tore deeper into the woodland labyrinth. Behind us, the SUV followed, its bulk shouldering aside the trees. My old car shuddered, protesting the abuse. But I pushed it onward, praying it wouldn't falter. We ditched the car, I gasped, mind racing. Too visible. Silas nodded, his face a pale mask in the intermittent moonlight filtering through the canopy. A small clearing materialized ahead. I steered towards it, killing the headlights as we entered. We burst into the open space, and I slammed the brakes, sending us into a final jarring spin. The moment we stopped, I was out, hauling Silas with me. Run, I hissed, dragging him towards the thick, concealing undergrowth bordering the clearing. We crashed into the absolute dark, thorns staring at fabric, unseen roots conspiring to trip us. Behind, the sound of the pursuing SUV crashing through timber, drawing nearer. We ran until our lungs burned, until the sounds of pursuit began to thin, swallowed by the woods. Finally, muscles screaming, breath tearing at my throat, we stumbled upon the skeletal frame of an old derelict barn. Here, I choked, wrestling the warped door open. Inside, the blackness was absolute, thick with the scent of musty hay, rusted iron, and time itself. We felt our way blindly to a far corner. collapsing into a huddle, struggling to muffle our ragged gasps. Minutes stretched into eternities, each groan of the ancient structure. Every rustle of leaves outside sent jolts of pure fear through me. What had I done? "I'm sorry," Silas whispered beside me, the sound barely disturbing the suffocating stillness. Never wanted this. Anger, sharp and hot despite the fear, surged within me. I turned towards his unseen shape. "What exactly is this, Silas? I think I've earned the whole story." A long silence hung between us, heavy with unspoken dread. Then a sigh, freighted with exhaustion. "Worked for them. The ones chasing us. Outfit, you know? Serious players. I was nobody. Errands, pickups, but I saw things." The air grew colder. "What kind of things?" "Ending people," he murmured, the words barely audible. "Making them suffer. Monsters, couldn't stomach it. Had to get out. Knew they wouldn't just let me walk. Not with what I knew. So I took insurance. Cash, gems, yeah, but also papers. Proof." Nausea churned in my stomach. "And now they want us both." Silas nodded, a miserable gesture in the dark. "So sorry. Never meant to pull anyone else in." Before I could form a response, a blade of light sliced through the barn's interior darkness. We froze, breath caught in our throats. "Know you're in there," a voice rasped, coarse as gravel. "Come on out. Maybe your friend walks away." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I was sure they could hear. Beside me, Silas trembled violently, his breathing shallow, panicked. "What do we do?" I whispered, the words sticking in my dry throat. His hand found mine in the blackness, pressing a thick sheaf of papers into my palm. The documents. "Take these," he urged, his whisper urgent. "Police, only way." Before I could react, he was rising. "I'm here," he called out, his voice resonating with a surprising sudden steadiness. "Let him go. He knows nothing." "No," I hissed, reaching, but he was already moving towards the light. The beam pinned him. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful, advanced on the barn floor. "Run," Silas said, his back to me. "Get those papers out. Make it count." Every instinct screamed to pull him back, to hide, but the weight of the documents in my hand, the grim finality in his voice. He was right. This was bigger now. As the footsteps closed in on Silas, I melted backwards, seeking the barn's rear wall, moving with a silence born of terror. My fingers found rotten wood, pried at a loose board, creating a narrow gap. I squeezed through, the cool night air a shocking slap. Behind me, angry voices erupted, followed by the flat, definitive crack of a single gunshot echoing through the silent trees. I ran, blindly, desperately, propelled by adrenaline and the chilling echo of that shot. I ran until my legs felt like lead, until the barn and its contained horror were a fading nightmare behind me. As the first tentative strokes of dawn painted the eastern horizon, I found myself on the ragged edge of a sleeping town. Hands shaking uncontrollably, I pulled out the papers Silas had entrusted to me. Names, dates, grainy photographs. A chilling chronicle of brutality that turned my blood to ice. I knew what came next. For Silas, for myself, for the unseen victims catalogued in these damning pages. Walking towards the blocky silhouette of the local police station, the documents a tangible weight against my chest, I reflected on the night's precipitous turn. A simple offer of a ride, an act of wary kindness, had irrevocably altered the course of my life, plunging me from mundane fatigue into stark terror. Yet sometimes, clarity arrives only in the deepest darkness. Pushing open the heavy station door, I felt not an ending, but the raw, uncertain beginning of something far larger. Shards of window glass, sharp as teeth, bit into the soles of my bare feet. My fingers scrabbled for the familiar weight of the ashwood bat beside the bed frame. A frantic drumbeat thudded against my ribs. A primal rhythm overwhelming everything but the alien cadence of footsteps. Wrong footsteps, echoing through my sanctuary. My predictable, meticulously ordered existence had just fractured irrevocably. Elias, that's my name. Until this violation, fortune seemed my constant companion. 35 years old, tethered to a dependable career, rooted in a pleasant house on a street lined with quietude. Life unfolded with comforting regularity. Now enveloped by shadow, the bat a clumsy talisman in my grip. The fragility of that constructed piece became terrifyingly clear. Wednesday bled into Thursday. The clock glowed 2:07 a.m. Exhaustion from the day's grind had pulled me under early. Then the violent percussion of shattering glass ripped me from sleep's embrace. Disorientation warred with instinct. A moment later, the sound solidified. Muffled whispers, the groan of floor timbers beneath alien weight. A cold fire ignited in my veins. My hand shot to the nightstand. Phone, lifeline, only to grasp useless dead plastic. Idiot. Hadn't charged it. A silent curse formed on my lips as I hefted the bat, moving with excruciating slowness toward the bedroom door. Every sinew pulled taut as a bowstring. Downstairs, in the heart of my home, chaos stirred. The distinct noises of violation, drawers wrenched open, possessions poured through. A dull thud resonated upwards, making me recoil. My brain spun, a frantic carousel of inadequate options. Fight, flee, conceal myself and pray. Hesitation proved a luxury I couldn't afford. Footfalls, heavier now, found the staircase. Ascending, panic clawed at my throat, a suffocating tide I fought to suppress. Think, Elias, think. My gaze swept the familiar confines, seeking sanctuary or egress. The window, yes. It offered a view of the rear garden, a fall certainly, but survivable. With infinite care, I eased the sash upward. Night air, cool and damp, rushed in, a brief antidote to the stifling fear. One leg poised on the sill, freedom beckoning, when a sibilant whisper sliced through the tension just beyond the wood. Check in here. The brass knob began its inexorable rotation. Thought evaporated, instinct roared. I surged forward, the bat arcing through the air just as the door swung inward. A hideous, wet thwack followed by a strangled cry. I didn't linger, didn't look. I scrambled past the crumpled shape obstructing the doorway, stumbling over unseen limbs in my frantic propulsion. At the stairwell's precipice stood another figure, momentarily paralyzed, eyes mirroring my own shock. A tableau held for a heartbeat, shattered when his hand darted toward his waistband. Metal glinted. No time. I lunged a primal surge, leveraging my weight and the bat's momentum. He staggered. We collided, and the world became a chaotic vortex of flailing arms, sharp curses, and splintering wood as we cascaded down the stairs. Agony flared in my shoulders upon impact. A white-hot nova I shoved aside, scrabbling upright, vision swimming. The front door. Salvation mere yards away. I lurched towards it, only for a new shadow to loom, eclipsing the entryway. This one was immense, a monolith of muscle-blocking escape. Going somewhere. The voice was a low rumble, freighted with menace, as he stepped forward. Retreating, my gaze frantically scanned the periphery, the bat, gone, swallowed by the chaos of the fall, defenseless, outnumbered, trapped. Then a sliver of hope, the back door, cracked open, a careless entry point now offering potential escape. My only path. A quick feint left, then a desperate surge right, slipping beneath the giant's reaching claws. A guttural curse followed me, unheard over the frantic pounding in my ears. My bare feet slapped cold tile as I sprinted through the kitchen, bursting into the dew-kissed night. Cool grass met abused soles. Darkness pooled in the garden. The perimeter fence a stark silhouette against the bruised sky. Behind me, the sounds of pursuit, shouts, the splintering symphony of my violated home. Instinct propelled me toward the fence. High, imposing, but beside it grew the oak I'd neglected to prune. Procrastination, tonight, felt like providence. Bark tore at my skin as I clawed my way upward, adrenaline masking the pain. Just as my hand closed over the fence's summit, fingers like iron clamped around my ankle. A blind, reflexive kick connected with yielding flesh. A choked gasp, the pressure released. Without pause, I launched myself over, hitting the earth on the other side with jarring force. Fire lanced through my ankle, but rising was imperative. Stopping meant capture, or worse. I landed in Mr. Abernathy's meticulously kept flower bed. Abernathy, whose perceived crankiness about my weekend music now seemed utterly trivial. His modest house moments ago, just part of the suburban backdrop, now shimmered like a fortress. Hobbling on my throbbing ankle, I reached his back door and hammered against it with desperate fists. "Help! Please help me!" My voice cracked raw. Interior lights blinked awake, an agonizing wait, then the door opened to reveal Abernathy, his usual stern composure fractured by bewilderment. "Elias, merciful heavens, what is it?" "Please," I choked out, words tumbling over each other. "Let me in. Intruders. My house. Chasing me." Without hesitation, he pulled me inside. The deadbolt clicking shut with reassuring finality. As his trembling fingers found his telephone, enraged shouts drifted across the lawn from my ravaged home. They were still hunting. Time dissolved into a disorienting haze. Sirens wailed, painting the quiet street in strobes of red and blue. Shouted commands echoed, punctuated by the sharp retort of gunfire. Later, fragments of information coalesced. Two apprehended, the colossal third vanished into the night. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a residue of trembling shock and nauseating clarity. Questions were asked, answers given numbly. Paramedics assessed scrapes and bruises. Finally, as the first fragile light of dawn stained the sky, I stepped back across my own threshold. The physical destruction was stark. Overturned drawers vomiting contents, fractured furniture, a landscape of violated possessions, yet the deeper wreckage wasn't visible. The very concept of home, of sanctuary, lay in ruins, as fragmented as the glass on the floor. Sleep became an elusive quarry in the ensuing days. Every creak of the settling house, every rattle of a window pane sent jolts of ice through my system. He was still out there, the hulking shadow. Would he return? The question festered. I armored the house, alarms, reinforced locks, steel bars across vulnerable glass, even cold metal purchased for defense. Yet, security remained a phantom sensation, always just beyond reach. The foundations of my perceived safety had crumbled, revealing the precariousness beneath. Weeks bled into months. Life's routines exerted their gentle pull. The commute, the office, tentative evenings with friends, but a subtle alteration persisted. A heightened vigilance, a constant low-level scan of faces in a crowd. Threat or benign became my unwelcome companion. This pervasive suspicion wasn't living. Acknowledging the need for aid, I sought the quiet counsel of a therapist. Untangling the knots of fear and anxiety was arduous work, yet slowly, painstakingly, fragments of the old Elias began to resurface. Perhaps half a year post-invasion, retrieving mail, I encountered Mr. Abernathy. His inquiry about my well-being held an unexpected warmth. We spoke, leaning against our respective mailboxes, for well over an hour. He revealed slivers of his own history. The jungles of Vietnam, the quiet grief of widowhood, a solitude that often masqueraded as gruffness. An improbable connection formed. Sunday coffees became ritual. Shared silences during televised games comfortable. He offered practical wisdom, born of hard experience, on fortifying my home without sacrificing its soul. 12 months later, news arrived. The third man, the giant, apprehended after a multi-state crime spree. The notification triggered an exhale I hadn't known I was holding, releasing an immense, invisible pressure. That night, tentatively, I slid my bedroom window open. The gentle ingress of night air, the familiar nocturnal chorus, crickets, distant traffic, felt benevolent, not threatening. They spoke of continuity, of healing's quiet persistence, of fear's receding tide. The violation undeniably reshaped me. Yet, not every alteration was scar tissue. A sharper awareness, yes, but counterbalanced by a profound gratitude for the threads connecting me to others, to this unassuming street. Complacency about safety vanished, but fear no longer dictates terms. Sometimes, a sudden sound in the deep hours still sparks that old cold dread. But now, I breathe through it. I recall my resilience, the fact of my survival. The world retains its capacity for menace, true. But it also holds startling reserves of kindness. Neighbors extending sanctuary in the darkest hour. Unexpected alliances that mend fractured spirits. This ultimately is the wisdom salvaged from the wreckage. Not the omnipresence of danger, but the surprising depths of human strength, and the way profound adversity can sometimes illuminate the path toward a truer version of ourselves. My initial glimpse of him, A silhouette poised above my bed felt ripped from a slumbering dread. Darkness carved his form, utterly still, utterly silent. An eye blink, a clearing of vision, and the space he occupied was empty air. If only that erasure had been real. If only the nightmare hadn't just taken its first tentative breath. Scarcely a month prior, I'd taken possession of the flat. No grand affair. This small one-bedroom, tucked away on a street where quietude felt less like peace and more like neglect. The rent, almost apologetic in its modesty, should have screamed caution. But fleeing the wreckage of a relationship, desperate for sanctuary, I'd grasped at the key offered by the landlord, Alistair Finch. Relief blinded me to the way his gaze seemed to catalogue the space, and me within it, or the unnerving familiarity with which he navigated the layout, needing no reference. Those nascent weeks unfolded with deceptive calm. Cardboard mountains yielded their contents. Possessions found temporary homes, and the fragile scaffolding of a rebuilt life began to rise. Then commenced the subtle disturbances, the quiet reordering of my small world. A novel, definitively abandoned on the low table, would reappear nestled amongst its brethren on the bookshelf. The milk level in the carton plummeted inexplicably between evening and dawn. My preferred ceramic mug materialized in an unfamiliar cabinet, a tiny baffling migration. Initially, I blamed the fraying edges of my own mind. Stress, exhaustion from the new job, the understandable fog of transition. Misplacing items, forgetting small actions, perfectly logical. Yet the disquiet deepened, coalescing from vague unease into a persistent thrum of wrongness. Other anomalies surfaced. Returning from work, the very atmosphere within the apartment felt altered, charged, as if recently occupied. A faint, stale perfume, something like damp earth and old paper, clung to the air, defying identification. And once, wrenched from sleep, I registered the distinct cadence of footsteps padding the hallway, just beyond my bedroom door. Investigation revealed only shadows and silence. 3 weeks dissolved into the fourth. It was then I awoke shivering, not from dream fear, but from a tangible draft. My bedroom window, the one I religiously secured each night, especially being on the ground floor, stood ajar. The cool pre-dawn air kissed my skin as I rose to latch it. And there, stark against the worn carpet just inside the sill, a muddy sigil, a footprint, my pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, denial ward with certainty. A shadow perhaps? A trick of the low light? But the truth pressed in, cold and sharp. Someone had stood within my room, breathing the same air while I lay, vulnerable in sleep. The constabulary came, surveyed, departed. No forced entry, they reported. No latent prints, nothing purloined. Their placid explanations. Perhaps I'd forgotten the latch. Perhaps the mud was my own unwitting import. Felt like flimsy gauze over a gaping wound. I yearned to accept their mundane conclusions, but an internal compass spun wildly, pointing towards an intrusion I couldn't unknow. Sleep became a fortress besieged. Every floorboard sigh, every moan of wind against the glass, jolted me upright, heart seizing. It was during one such hyper-vigilant vigil that he manifested again. A stark cutout against the ambient gloom at the foot of my bed. A statue carved from night. My gasp was swallowed by the sudden silence as my hand scrabbled, desperate, for the bedside lamp switch. Light flooded the room, banishing him instantly. Gone. Imagination, I insisted. Stress-induced phantoms. Sleep deprivation's cruel theater. Yet the encounter left a residue of ice in my veins. My nightly rituals intensified. Locks tested and retested. A sturdy chair wedged beneath the bedroom doorknob, a barricade against the unseen. Fleeing seemed the only rational course, but the daunting logistics, broken leases, the search anew, felt insurmountable. So, defiance sparked. I acquired a small surveillance device, a clock radio harboring a hidden eye, positioning it on the dresser for a commanding view. If my sanctuary was being breached, the trespasser would be unmasked. Night after night yielded nothing save footage of my own restless slumber. Then the fourth night delivered its chilling revelation. I woke to the insistent buzz of my alarm, moved through the morning routine on autopilot, and left for the day. Only upon returning that evening did the camera flicker back into my awareness. Retrieving the memory card, I played back the night's silent testimony. My blood turned to slush. The recording began mundanely. Sylvie, lost in sleep, but around the nadir of the night, 2:30 a.m., the bedroom door edged open with excruciating slowness. A figure slipped inside, navigating the familiar space with a proprietary stillness. Alistair Finch, my landlord. He lingered near the doorway, simply observing my unconscious form. Then, a slow perambulation began. His fingers brushed my hairbrush, traced the spine of a novel on my nightstand. He eased open the closet, his hand ghosting across the fabrics of my clothes, a phantom inventory of my private sphere. All the while, I slept, utterly exposed. After perhaps 10 minutes, an eternity compressed, he drifted towards the bed. Horror coiled in my gut as I watched his screen self lean close, his face a pale mask inches from my own, studying my unawareness with unnerving intensity. He remained thus, suspended in that violating proximity, before retracting as silently as he had arrived. A wave of nausea washed over me. The trespass, the profound invasion of my most vulnerable state. It was almost unbearable. Yet, beneath the revulsion and fear, anger began to smolder, hot and clean. The audacity. How many times? How many others? The impulse to dial the police warred with a cold pragmatism. Would they believe this spectral evidence? Could Finch retaliate, twist the narrative? No. More was needed. Irrefutable proof. Capture in the act. A plan formed, sharp and desperate. The following night, I mimicked my usual bedtime routine, extinguishing the lights, settling beneath the covers, but sleep was a distant country. Every nerve ending hummed, taut with anticipation, listening, hours crawled. Just as doubt began to whisper that he wouldn't come, the faint, metallic sigh of the front door lock reached my ears. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs, surely loud enough to betray me. I commanded my breath, slow even, feigning slumber, as his soft tread approached my room. The door creaked inward. I waited, sensing his nearness, the shift in the air beside the bed. Then, in a single explosive movement, I surged upright, flicking the lamp switch. Alistair Finch stood frozen, caught squarely in the sudden glare, eyes wide like a startled nocturnal creature. A breathless moment stretched between us, pure, distilled confrontation. Then, his lips curved into a smile. Not warmth, not apology, but the predatory acknowledgement of a hunter momentarily inconvenienced. "You're awake," he observed, his tone unnervingly placid. "Out," I commanded, surprised by the steadiness that infused my voice. "Get out of my apartment now, or I call the police." A low chuckle rumbled in his chest, deeply unsettling. "And claim what, precisely?" "That your landlord utilized his master key for a routine property check?" "Perfectly within my rights, you'll find. Stipulated in the lease." My hand reached for the phone on the nightstand. His movement was faster, his grip clamping around my wrist like a vice, cold and strong. "I wouldn't advise that," he hissed, the civility vanishing, replaced by a raw menace. "You cannot fathom what I might do." In that instant, the full spectrum of his derangement became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't mere voyeurism. He was unmoored from reason, and I was cornered. But victimhood was a garment I refused to wear again. My free hand, acting on pure instinct, found the lamp's heavy base. I swung, channeling fear into force. The impact against his skull was a sickening thud, echoing the crack of bone. He staggered back, grip slackening. I didn't pause. Scrambling from the bed, I fled the room, a blur through the small living area, fingers fumbling desperately with the deadbolt and knob. Behind me, curses, the uneven thud of his pursuit, gaining ground. The lock finally yielded. I burst into the relative safety of the building's hallway, launching myself down the stairs, 2, 3 at a time, refusing the urge to look back. The cool night air hit my face as I reached the street, running until the reassuring blue lights of the police station 2 blocks distant swam into view. Gasping, trembling, I recounted the night, the preceding weeks, the insidious creep of his intrusions. This time, they truly heard. My statement was taken. The chilling video file viewed on my phone screen, officers dispatched. Alistair Finch's reign of quiet terror ended that night. Subsequent investigation unearthed a history, a pattern. Burglaries, stalking, woven through the city's neighborhoods. He resides now within walls far more secure than mine ever were, awaiting judgment. Yet the phantom lingers. Some nights, I still wake abruptly, the ghost of his gaze prickling my skin. The apartment was abandoned, of course. A new place, secured across town, chosen with meticulous care. Vigilance is my new shadow. Locks are obsessively checked, curtains drawn against the night. Some might label it paranoia. I call it the hard-won instinct of survival. For the monsters are not relegated to childhood fables, lurking in shadowed corners or beneath dust-ruffled beds. No, the truly terrifying monsters walk among us, offering smiles, dangling keys to dwellings filled with cheap rent and suffocating secrets. Sometimes, the only recourse is to wrench open the curtains, to flood their hidden spaces with uncompromising light, exposing the ugliness they cultivate in the dark. It demands courage, raw and trembling, but it is necessary. Left unchallenged, they continue their silent watch from the periphery, patient predators, awaiting the next unsuspecting soul. So, heed the tremor along your nerves, that primal whisper insisting something is fundamentally wrong. Trust it, and never fear flicking the switch, confronting whatever malignancy thrives in the absence of light. Often, that is the only incantation that compels the monsters to retreat. The first time that insistent rasping echoed from the rafters, I dismissed it, merely the ancient timbers of the house exhaling in the night. By the third recurrence, a deeper certainty had taken root. Something was profoundly amiss. What awaited me in that airless, forgotten space above would unravel my existence, fraying the edges of perceived reality, until the boundary between our world and the vast, unnameable elsewhere wore terrifyingly thin. An invitation to occupy my Aunt Elara and Uncle Reese's sprawling Victorian while they traversed Europe for a month felt like salvation. It stood in stark contrast to my own constricted city dwelling, a promise of solitude wherein my languishing novel might finally breathe. The house commanded a rise on the town's periphery, besieged by gnarled oaks whose limbs stretched long skeletal fingers across the neglected lawns. Yet, from the instant I crossed the threshold, an unsettling weight settled. The atmosphere within was miasmic, thick with the cloying perfume of naphthalene and decaying paper. As I hauled my luggage up the groaning staircase, each tread protesting, the distinct sensation of being observed prickled my skin. Nerves, I reasoned, the strangeness of a new place. 2 days dissolved into quiet routine. Mornings were surrendered to the rhythm of keystrokes, afternoons to aimless explorations of the house's shadowed corners and the wild grounds. Then came the third night, and the stillness fractured. I was wrenched from sleep by a sound descending from directly overhead. A faint, dry scuttling, like claws delicately tracing patterns on bare wood. Bleary, adrift in the pre-dawn dark, my clock glowed 3:17. An hour when the veil feels thinnest, some primal part of my mind whispered. Nothing, I murmured, drawing the quilt tighter, a flimsy shield. A squirrel, perhaps, lost in the eaves. But lying rigid in the blackness, senses straining, the sound intensified, grew more purposeful. It bore no resemblance to any nocturnal creature I knew. A cadence emerged, deliberate, almost inquisitive, as though the source sought acknowledgement. Sleep became an impossibility thereafter. I twisted in the sheets, my imagination a frantic loom, weaving ever more monstrous tapestries of possibility. When the first grey light finally seeped through the windows, I was a creature of frayed nerve endings, startled by every sigh and settling groan of the old structure. The day was spent hunched over a laptop, delving into the property's lineage, desperate for a mundane explanation. A forgotten pest problem, structural quirks, but history offered only blandness. Venerable age, yes, but no whispered tragedies, no gothic scandals, merely the unremarkable chronicle of a family home passed down through quiet generations. Dusk descended, not with peace, but with chilling apprehension that coiled low in my gut. Television offered a flickering, hollow distraction until the rasping commenced anew. Earlier this time, louder. Ignoring it was futile. A persistent, unnerving drumbeat signifying something present, something waiting overhead. I understood then. Avoidance was no longer an option. Investigation was imperative. Access to the attic was via a square hatch embedded in the ceiling of the upper landing. Hands unsteady, I wrestled the folding ladder down, its joints creaking in protest. My flashlight beam sliced into the oppressive gloom above, illuminating a cavern choked with spectral shapes. Furniture draped in shrouds of dust, stacks of forgotten cartons. Gossamer threads of cobwebs swayed like spectral rigging from the rafters, and the air hung heavy, tasting of stale time and disuse. A deep breath, a prayer muttered under my breath, and I ascended. The frantic thumping of my own heart, a sound loud enough, I feared, to betray my presence to whatever shared this forgotten space. Initially, nothing but the expected detritus of accumulated decades met my gaze. Then, as the cone of light swept across the far wall, it snagged on something unexpected. The subtle wink of metal half concealed behind leaning towers of boxes. Picking my way through the labyrinth of discarded belongings, I shifted aside the cardboard obstacles. Revealed was a door, diminutive, intricately wrought, set impossibly into the plaster wall, its brass handle filmed with the verdigris of age. It resonated with an aura of profound wrongness, a misplaced fragment from some shadowed fable, utterly alien to this suburban attic. Hesitantly, I extended a hand. The instant my fingertips grazed the cool metal of the handle, the scratching erupted once more, sharp and frantic, now undeniably originating from behind the door. My hand recoiled as if burned, my pulse hammering against my ribs. This defied logic. Impossible. The house's exterior architecture allowed for no such hidden chamber. Yet, defying every instinct shrieking for retreat, I gripped the handle, turned with a low groan of reluctant hinges. The small door swung inward, opening onto a darkness so absolute it seemed to actively consume the beam of my light. The scratching ceased abruptly, replaced by a silence that pressed in on all sides, heavy and watchful. Leaning forward, I strained to penetrate the void beyond the threshold. It was then I felt it, a distinct exhalation of cold air against my face, carrying an odor simultaneously ancient and cloying, musty decay, interwoven with a sickly, stomach-churning sweetness. "Hello?" The word emerged as a fragile tremor. "Is anyone there?" No voice answered. Instead, a violent surge of wind erupted from the opening, extinguishing my flashlight with contemptuous ease and staggering me backward. I stumbled, scrabbling for balance, but the threshold had been crossed. Awareness had been acknowledged. Something stirred within the absolute black. A rustling first, then a fluid, slithering susurrus that raised the hairs on my arms, and then they began to emerge. Not one, but dozens, figures coalescing from the darkness. Vaguely anthropomorphic, yet fundamentally wrong, in ways language could not capture. They flowed rather than walked, pouring through the doorway like sentient smoke, their movements defying the familiar laws of physics. A scream lodged itself in my throat, useless. Flight was impossible. I was pinned by a primal terror transcending anything previously known. They drifted closer, forming a silent, observing circle. Their faces, if they could be called such, were blank voids, yet somehow radiated an insatiable, chilling avarice. One entity detached itself from the throng, its limb elongating with impossible elasticity. Frigid fingertips, colder than ice, brushed my cheek. The contact was electric, jolting. In that fleeting touch, understanding flooded me. Visions of myriad worlds, realities stacked like layers of brittle glass upon our own. And within each layer, these beings resided, watching, waiting, their claws perpetually scratching at the fragile partitions between dimensions. The deluge of cosmic insight threatened to shatter my mind, my sense of self splintering under the sheer weight of forbidden knowledge. Just as oblivion beckoned, a shrill, mundane sound sliced through the unearthly tableau. My mobile phone ringing insistently from the bedroom below. The connection snapped. I gasped, lungs desperate for air, as if surfacing from immense depths. The shadowy forms recoiled, momentarily disrupted, flowing back towards the impossible aperture. I didn't linger. Scrambling down the ladder with frantic haste, I slammed the trapdoor shut, the heavy thud echoing in the sudden profound silence. I fled to my room, snatched the ringing phone. Aunt Elara's name glowed on the screen. My hand trembled as I answered. "Hello? Are you quite all right, dear?" Her voice, warm and familiar, was laced with an unusual thread of worry. I had the most peculiar feeling just now that something wasn't right. My mouth opened, the truth poised on my tongue, but the words refused to form. How could I articulate the impossible? Who would possibly believe? I'm fine, Aunt Elara. I managed, my voice a ragged whisper. Just a vivid nightmare, I suppose. We spoke for a few minutes more, her everyday concerns a temporary anchor in the storm-tossed sea of my reality. Yet, even as we exchanged pleasantries, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The world outside the window seemed subtly altered, the shadows holding deeper secrets, the very air thrumming with unseen potential. After disconnecting, I sat numbly on the edge of the bed, the experience replaying itself with terrifying clarity. One part of me screamed to pack, to flee this house and never look back. But another, quieter, darker curiosity had taken root. What were they? From whence did they emerge? And why manifest here, in this outwardly ordinary home? The remainder of the night was lost to a feverish plunge into the internet's esoteric underbelly, trawling obscure forums and fringe websites dedicated to high strangeness and the paranormal. What I unearthed was both horrifying and galvanizing. Scattered accounts, fragmented whispers from others who spoke of impossible portals, of shadows that moved with intent. As dawn painted the sky in bruised colors, a decision crystallized. Leaving was not an option, not yet. Too many questions remained unanswered. Too much of the terrifying truth lay veiled. I would remain, for now, determined to understand the secret harbored by that attic door. But I would not face it unarmed. The day was spent gathering a strange arsenal. Lines of salt, iron filings gleaned from a hardware store, protective sigils copied from half a dozen disparate belief systems. I had no certainty any of it would avail me, but inaction felt like surrender. Night fell once more, and with the darkness returned, the familiar chilling summons from above. The scratching. This time, however, I ascended the ladder, not in blind panic, but with grim resolve, my collection of makeshift wards clutched tight. I braced myself for the unknown. Yet, nothing could have truly readied me for the sight that greeted my eyes as I pushed open the trapdoor. The small, ornate door stood wide open, and from the abyssal darkness beyond, something was undeniably coming through. This is not the end of my ordeal, but its true genesis. The chronicle of my unwilling enlistment in a conflict spanning realities, of the strange allies found, and the consuming dread of the entities I opposed. It is a narrative woven from cosmic terror and unexpected fortitude, charting the precarious edge between sanity and the abyss. Consider it, above all, a caution to any who might discover doorways where none should logically exist, who hear that faint, inexplicable scratching in the deep hours of the night. Tread carefully what thresholds you cross. Be wary of what you invite across, because once the veil is pierced, once you have glimpsed what lies beyond, retreat is no longer possible. The scratching in the attic is only ever the beginning. A stuttering pulse of neon bled through the smeared glass, painting the convenience store's interior in sickly hues. 2 a.m. Outside, the obsidian shell of a sedan had held its vigil for hours, engine a low thrum against the quiet dark. Tinted windows mirrored the desolate street, swallowing secrets. A wrongness prickled the nape of my neck, a premonition gathering like storm clouds. My name is Silas, and the premonition felt poised to break. 6 months tethered me to this graveyard orbit, orbiting the fluorescent hum of the 24-hour mart, a cycle of restocking swabbing linoleum, the chime of the door announcing solitary truckers or sleepless wanderers, the usual nocturnal rhythm. But this night dissonantly refused the pattern. Since 11, that dark vessel, incongruous against the neighborhood's decay, had anchored itself curbside. Initially dismissed, a lost soul, mechanical failure, its sheer immobility began to curdle into something more sinister as the clock hands crawled. Futile attempts at routine, polishing chrome, aligning chip bags, couldn't tether my gaze. It strayed, magnetically drawn to the sentinel outside. Then, the sky wept, a persistent drizzle blurring the sedan's sharp edges into a watercolor menace, deepening the scene's unreality. 1:30. An excuse formed, trash bins needing attention, a flimsy pretext to breach the threshold, to probe the enigma. The night air, cool and damp, kissed my face, a brief reprieve. I feigned diligence with the plastic lids, eyes flicking sidelong towards the car. Its windows remained impenetrable voids. Yet, turning back, a flicker, a definite stir within that obsidian silence. Occupied. Sanctuary behind the counter felt thin. Police? The thought surfaced, then sank. A car idling, they'd dismiss it. Patience then. 6 a.m. would bring relief, surely, but 2:30 shattered the fragile calm. A door clicked open, slicing the quiet. A figure emerged, etched against the rain-slicked asphalt. He moved with a jagged energy, pacing, hands raking through unseen tangles in his hair, lips moving in frantic, silent communion. Then, abruptly, a pivot, a trajectory aimed squarely at my door. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I'd weathered oddities, the frayed edges of humanity drawn to the late-night glow, but this man radiated sheer discord. Closer now, his eyes were frantic orbits, darting, unanchored. His attire, creased and weary, clung to him like a second exhausted skin. A subtle tremble agitated his hands. The overhead bell chimed, a brittle announcement in the profound stillness. He paused, framed in the doorway, his gaze sweeping the aisles before locking onto mine. Let's call him Mr. Crow. Evening, the word scraped out, striving for normalcy. Anything I can get for you? Silence answered, save for the hum of the coolers. He simply stared, those disquieting eyes plumbing depths I didn't want to know. Then a slow drift towards the counter. Ever get the feeling? His voice a low gravelly current. That you're being observed? A difficult swallow. Comes with territory, I suppose. Late nights. He leaned forward, invading my space. An aroma, stale perspiration, and something metallic, indefinable, prickled my nostrils. No, he insisted, the intensity tightening. Not the casual glance. I mean, watched eyes everywhere, tracking every breath. An instinctive retreat, a small step back. Listen, friend, are you all right? Need me to ring someone? A laugh cracked the air, sharp and brittle, making me flinch. Ring who? Who isn't part of it? They're all woven into it, don't you see? My fingers ghosted near the underside of the counter, searching for the smooth plastic of the panic button. A virgin device until now. Tell me, I ventured, keeping my tone level, placating. Tell me what's troubling you. Perhaps I can assist. His gaze sharpened, suspicion flaring. Assist? You want to assist? A hand dipped inside his worn jacket. My breath hitched. Weapon? No. He withdrew a folded, much-abused sheet of paper. Spreading it flat on the laminate surface revealed a frantic cartography of paranoia. Arrows, circles, scrawled declarations. See? He stabbed a finger at the chaotic map. The whole damn structure. Politics, big business, the patterns in the clouds. They pull the strings, Silas. We're just marionettes. I offered a slow nod, eyes fixed on his agitated face. That sounds frightening, I offered carefully. Frightening, he echoed, the volume swelling. It's annihilation. Have you conceived, even for a second, what they're capable of? The lengths they'll go to bury the truth? He was nearly bellowing now, complexion high, flecks of saliva marking his fervor. My eyes darted to the door. A silent plea for interruption, for any other soul to break the spell, but the rain-streaked street remained utterly vacant. Sir, I interjected, forcing steel into my voice. I need you to lower your voice. You're alarming me. For a heartbeat, surprise flickered across his features, as if he'd momentarily forgotten his surroundings. Then the hardness returned, a mask snapping into place. Alarming you? You damn well should be alarmed. We all should. Their ears could be pressed to these very walls. He resumed his agitated patrol before the counter, a low drone of conspiracies escaping his lips. I tracked his movements, exhaustion settling in, my hand a breath away from the button. Fear warred with caution. Summoning help might provoke the very chaos I dreaded. Abruptly he halted, fixing me with that intense stare again. Provisions, he stated flatly. Sustenance, water, power cells, weeks' worth. A wave of relief washed over me. A task, something concrete. Right? I nodded. Of course, grab a carrier, I'll point you. We navigated the fluorescent canyons, his basket steadily filling with tins and plastic bottles. His monologue, a relentless undercurrent of hidden networks and shadowy directives. I murmured vague assents, aiming for placation, simultaneously scanning for a safe moment to regain the relative safety of the till. Basket laden, we finally returned. As the scanner beeped its mundane rhythm over tins of beans and shrink-wrapped batteries, he leaned near once more, his previous intensity now a conspiratorial whisper. "You strike me as decent, Silas," he murmured, untainted. "You need to vanish before they notice. Find a quiet corner of the world, erase your tracks. They haven't marked you. Not yet." I managed only a tight nod, words failing me. My hands trembled as I packed his supplies into flimsy plastic bags, hyper-aware of his proximity, his strange energy radiating outwards. $78.50, I managed, the figure sounding thin, unreal. He produced a thick cluster of worn banknotes, separating several and pressing them into my palm. While I fumbled with the change, I registered the tremor in his own fingers, mirroring mine. As I extended the coins, he waved them away. "Hold on to it," he said. "Might prove more valuable to you than me, sooner than you think." With that unsettling pronouncement, he hefted his burdens and made for the exit. I watched, pulse still erratic, as he reached the sedan. He paused, turning for one last look at the store, at me. Through the glass, our gazes locked for a charged instant. What swam in his eyes? Fear, certainly, but perhaps also a profound, desolate certainty. Then he folded himself inside. The engine flared, and the car peeled away into the wet darkness with a brief shriek of rubber. I remained rooted, staring at the vacant, rain-glossed tarmac, the silence rushing back in, thick with the residue of his visit. The final hours bled together, each chime of the door a jolt to my system, expecting his return. But only the familiar ghost of dawn drifted in. Weary shift workers seeking caffeine, delivery drivers replenishing stock. When 6 o'clock finally arrived, bringing my relief, Leo, I hesitated. Should I recount the night's strangeness? In the nascent daylight filtering through the windows, the encounter felt dreamlike, perhaps exaggerated by solitude and shadow. Just a man unraveling, I told myself. Yet stepping out into the cool, clean morning, the conviction lingered. Something fundamental had shifted. The street, the buildings, they wore their usual faces, but perceived through a new, unsettling lens, as if a filter had been removed, revealing unsettling details previously unseen. The walk home was slow, my thoughts a loop of the man, Mr. Crow, his wild eyes, his crumpled map, his parting words reverberating, "Not yet." I tried to banish the unease, dismiss it as contagious delusion. He was unwell, surely. But ascending the stairs to my apartment, an involuntary glance back towards the street sought the phantom shape of a black sedan in the morning shadows. That night drew a line. I left the convenience store not long after, citing the need for new horizons. The truth lay deeper. Every late shift had become a vigil, my gaze perpetually scanning the empty lot, coiled with an expectation I couldn't shake. Sometimes, adrift in the small hours, the question still surfaces, unwelcome. What if the ravings held a kernel of truth? What if unseen eyes are watching? And how do you live when the whispers of paranoia begin to resonate with the chilling, terrible logic? Bone weary, the hospital shift finally surrendered Ilara to the indifferent quiet of the Appalachian night. Midnight had bled across the sky, leaving the roads outside Charleston slicked with emptiness. Her route home snaked through unlit stretches, a ribbon of asphalt threading through silent hills. A remoteness she usually cherished. Tonight, though, the solitude felt different. Thin. She slipped into her car, the familiar click of the seatbelt a small anchor in the vast dark. Pulling onto the highway, her headlights sliced a lonely tunnel through the oppressive black. Only the engine's thrum and the radio's faint whisper disturbed the silence. Exhaustion clung like damp wool, but her gaze remained fixed ahead, navigating the familiar curves. Perhaps 10 minutes dissolved before twin orbs of light bloomed in her rearview mirror. Another late traveler, she assumed, dismissing the flicker. Yet the lights didn't recede or pass. They swelled, growing brighter, closer, an insistent glare that scalded her reflection. They hung there, mimicking her pace, an unwelcome satellite tethered to her bumper, whether she sped up or slowed. A prickle of annoyance sharpened into a sliver of unease. No reason for such aggressive proximity on this desolate stretch. She feathered the brakes, a gentle suggestion to back off. The response was immediate, brutal. A double flash of high beams, sharp as a slap. Her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Her pulse kicked against her ribs. The vehicle itself remained a shapeless shadow behind the blinding glare. Stay calm, impatient driver, lost maybe. But the conviction settled cold and heavy in her gut as the miles unspooled. This wasn't chance. She was being followed. Drawing a ragged breath, Elara fought to steady her hands. A glance at the fuel gauge, half a tank, ample, offered scant comfort. Just keep driving. They'll turn off, but the relentless closeness, the sheer presence of the unseen driver made her skin crawl. A few more tense miles, then a decision, sharp and sudden. A narrow service road branched off to the left, leading to a derelict gas station. A test, if they followed her here. Her heart hammered as she wrenched the wheel, tires spitting gravel. In the mirror, the pursuing headlights paused, then bled onto the side road after her. Nausea twisted low in her stomach. Not a coincidence. Not random. Cold sweat beaded on her forehead as she coasted into the service station's cracked, empty lot. She parked beneath the sputtering fluorescence of a single surviving lamp, killed the engine, and waited, eyes scanning the entrance, the thud of her pulse loud in her ears. Darkness reclaimed the road for a breathless moment. Had they given up? A fragile hope flickered, instantly extinguished. A car, dark and silent, rolled slowly into the lot, its engine a low growl. It stopped several spaces away. Tinted windows reflected the sickly light, revealing nothing. Headlights off now, it simply sat, waiting. Trapped, options scattered like frightened birds in her mind. Confront them? Madness. Call someone. Who at this hour, this far out? Stay put, doors locked, fingers clamped on the wheel. That seemed the only choice. Her gaze locked onto the silent car, willing it to leave. Minutes stretched, elastic and agonizing. She fumbled for her phone. 911? What would she report? A car. Sitting? They hadn't moved, hadn't threatened. Yet the certainty hardened with each passing second. This was deliberate. The waiting became unbearable. Her hands trembled as she twisted the key, the engine's sudden roar shattering the stillness. She pulled out, turning back toward the main highway, creeping at first, praying they wouldn't stir. But the instant her tires hit the asphalt, the twin beams flared behind her. Closer now, practically fused to her bumper. An agonizing, blinding pressure. Panic seized her throat, sharp claws digging in. What did they want? Why? The only imperative was escape. She jammed the accelerator, the car surging forward. Her eyes darted between the swallowing darkness ahead and the searing light filling her mirror. Faster, faster. But they matched her effortlessly, those lights a constant, inescapable torment. Another turn, impulsive, onto a winding back road, hoping the tight curves might shake them. Futile, they mirrored every twist, every correction, as if they traced this path 1,000 times. Sweat slicked her palms. Her breath came in shallow, painful gasps. The night pressed in, heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by those relentless, burning eyes. Then a flicker of possibility. A rough dirt track cutting sharply right, barely more than a path into the trees. Without conscious thought, she veered onto it, dust pluming behind her. A desperate gamble. For a precious second, the mirror showed only darkness. The dim silhouettes of trees rushing past. Lost them. The hope was a physical pang, immediately crushed as the headlights reappeared, impossibly close, as if they'd anticipated the move, lying in wait. Terror washed over her, cold and absolute. She knew these hills, but not this track. Where did it lead? Did it loop back? Did it end? No time to wonder. Just drive. Put distance between her and the phantom behind. Suddenly, the track ceased to exist. Brakes slammed, tires skidded. She found herself in a small clearing, hemmed in by dense woods. A dead end. Earth, trees, and silence. She cut the engine, listening. Every muscle coiled. The headlights behind her paused at the clearing's edge. She could see the car more clearly now. A dark, hulking shape. Its beams carving long, distorted shadows from the trees. Stillness, waiting, watching. Run? Into the pitch-black woods? Stay? A target in a cage. Her mind spun uselessly. Then movement. Slow, deliberate. The car began to inch forward, creeping across the dirt, closing the gap. A surge of pure adrenaline hit her. Do something. Now. She inhaled sharply, fired the engine, slammed the gear stick into reverse. Tires screamed, clawing at the loose earth. She wrenched the wheel, swerving wildly around the approaching vehicle, then jammed the accelerator, hurtling back down the narrow track, refusing to look back. The roar of their engine pursued, a mechanical snarl, relentless, inescapable. She pushed her car to its limit, navigating the treacherous track by instinct, hands locked on the wheel in a death grip. Every bump, every turn threatened disaster, but slowing down wasn't an option. The glare still pulsed in her mirror, clinging, suffocating. She burst back onto the main road, maintaining speed, focused solely on distance. The headlights followed. And then, as abruptly as they had materialized, they were gone. Vanished into the night. She didn't slow, didn't dare glance back. The drive home was a blur, fueled by residual terror. her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Pulling into her driveway, she sat for a long moment in the enveloping darkness, the silence profound, trying to leash the ragged edges of her breath. Then, a reflexive check of the rearview mirror. Her blood turned to ice. There, lying innocuously on the back seat, was a folded piece of paper, scrawled in unsteady letters. "See you soon." She scrambled out, fumbling with keys, stumbling into the house, slamming and locking the door. The police came, listened, found nothing. No trace of the car, no explanation. Weeks have passed. The car hasn't reappeared, but the fear remains, a cold knot in her stomach. Every time she slides behind the wheel, her eyes flick instinctively to the back seat, her breath catching, waiting for the inevitable return of those blinding lights in the mirror. Twin suns burning steady in the rear view's dark reflection. They'd materialized hours ago, an unwavering presence tethered to my bumper across the vacant ribbon of highway. Initially, just another traveler sharing the desolate path, but now, as the actual sun bled orange and violet below the world's rim, casting skeletal shadows across the parched earth, a cold dread began its slow crawl up my spine. The truck, it was closing the distance. This journey, this solo pilgrimage west, had been a long-held reverie. The siren song of the open road, absolute liberty, the unknown unfolding with each mile. It had beckoned relentlessly. Finally, unshackled from work, I'd loaded my faithful old sedan, the Sparrow, and surrendered to the highway's pull. The first days unfurled exactly as dreamt. Melodies sung off-key to the radio's crackle. Detours for faded roadside oddities. Skies ablaze with sunset masterpieces. But this fourth day, adrift in the desert's immense silence, felt different, tainted. Mile after monotonous mile unspooled, the landscape a hypnotist's loop of sand, skeletal creosote, and wind-scoured monoliths. The solitude, once embraced as liberation, now pressed in heavy and suffocating. Another glance in the mirror. Still there, a hulking silhouette against the twilight's bruised palette. It had fallen in behind me not long after a dusty gas stop, 100 miles swallowed since. Just another vehicle, I'd reasoned, dismissing the flicker of unease. Plenty traversed these routes. Yet, as the asphalt blurred beneath and no other headlights pierced the gloom, that initial whisper of worry swelled into a knot-tightening low in my gut. My foot nudged the accelerator. The speedometer needle climbed. 70, 75, 80. The Sparrow strained, but the truck behind held its position with contemptuous ease, a shadow refusing to lengthen or shrink. A slick dampness bloomed on my palms. My knuckles whitened around the worn steering wheel. Paranoia. I hissed into the empty car, the word tasting like ash. Just someone heading the same direction. The life felt thin, brittle. There was an unnerving deliberation in its pace, a predatory stillness in its pursuit. A green sign materialized from the dusk. Rest area 1 mile. Impulse seized me. Maybe, just maybe, I could shed this shadow there. Signal blinking, heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I veered onto the exit ramp, my eyes locked on the mirror. The truck's headlights swung, unwavering. It followed. The rest stop was stark. A patch of asphalt. A squat block, building housing restrooms and humming machines. Two slumbering giants, semi-trucks, occupied the far periphery. I slid the Sparrow into a space near the building, bathed in the sickly yellow pulse of a stuttering street light. The truck rumbled into the lot moments later, completing a slow, deliberate circuit before settling a few spaces away, facing me. Engine idling, a nervous tremor in its metal skin, I sat frozen, watching my side mirror. The truck's driver's side door creaked open. A figure emerged, tall, broad across the shoulders. The gloom obscured his face, rendering him a menacing cutout, but I felt the weight of his unseen gaze. He stood motionless for a beat, then deliberately began walking towards my car. Panic detonated within me. Gear shift slammed into reverse, tires protesting with a high-pitched squeal as I shot backward. In the rear view, a flash of movement. The figure breaking into a run, back towards his idling beast. I rocketed out of the rest stop, back onto the highway's dark embrace, breath tearing in ragged gasps. Behind me, the truck's engine roared, a guttural challenge, its headlights flaring like angry eyes. Oh gods, oh gods, oh gods! The chant escaped my lips, a desperate prayer as I pushed the little Sparrow to its absolute limit. The needle trembled past 90, nudged 100. The truck matched me, its dark mass swelling in the mirror, immense and inevitable. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. What could he possibly want? Why me? One hand scrabbled frantically for my phone, the other clamped, white-knuckled on the wheel. No signal. Predictable. Utterly, terrifyingly predictable in this wasteland. Closer now. The truck's massive grille dominated the rear view, a chrome grin. I could almost discern the driver, a dark shape locked behind the windshield. The Sparrow shuddered violently as we screamed past 110 miles per hour. Abruptly, the truck surged into the adjacent lane. My breath hitched, it drew level. A sideways glance, instantly regretted. The driver stared directly at me, visible even in the rushing darkness, a grotesque smile twisting his features. He gunned his engine, the sound a physical blow, and swerved towards my lane. Reflexively, I wrenched the wheel, the Sparrow bucking, tires screaming on the shoulder's edge as I narrowly evaded the collision. Heart hammering like a trapped bird, eyes scanning wildly for any salvation. Ahead, a turnoff, unsigned, vanishing into blackness. Without conscious thought, I yanked the wheel hard right. Tires shrieked, protesting the violent change of course as I flew down the exit ramp, missing the guardrail by inches. This new road was narrower, twisting through unseen hills like a coiled serpent. I took the curves at suicidal speeds, praying for adhesion, praying for escape. In the mirror, the truck's headlights swung wide, momentarily losing purchase on the sharp turn, buying me seconds, precious seconds. I flogged the Sparrow mercilessly, engine whining a high-pitched lament, each curve taken faster than the last. Trees became indistinct blurs rushing past. Destination unknown, irrelevant. Anywhere felt safer than being hunted on the open highway. An eternity compressed into minutes then. Lights glimmered ahead, a town, relief washed over me, hot and stinging like tears. Safety, police, people, but as I drew closer, the nascent hope withered. Not a town, some kind of sprawling gated compound, A sign whipped past, illegible in my haste. A factory, perhaps? An industrial plant? I slammed the brakes, the Sparrow skidding sideways, halting mere feet from heavy, impassive metal bars. Beside the gate stood a small guardhouse, dark, untenanted. "No, no, please, no," I whispered, gaze darting frantically. This gate, my only perceived sanctuary, was locked tight. The distant growl of an engine, rapidly closing, galvanized me. I threw open my door, scrambling towards the guardhouse, desperate for a button, a switch, any mechanism to grant passage. I'd barely reached the structure's shadow when blinding headlights flooded the area, accompanied by the full-throated roar of that infernal engine. The truck had found me. Time warped, stretching thin as I watched it hurtle down the narrow road, aimed squarely at me. In that instant of chilling clarity, I knew. He wasn't slowing down. He intended to ram my car, the gate, everything. Me. Primal instinct screamed louder than fear. I flung myself sideways, tumbling into a shallow, weed-choked ditch scant moments before the truck impacted the Sparrow. An unholy chorus of tortured metal and shattering glass ripped through the night. The force slammed my small car against the gate, which groaned under the assault but held. I lay in the dirt, ears ringing, limbs momentarily paralyzed by shock. The truck's engine idled, a deep menacing thrum filling the sudden quiet. Then, a door opened. Heavy footfalls crunched on gravel, approaching. "Come on out now, darling," a voice like rough gravel rasped. "No point hiding. Just wanna chat." A jolt, potent as electricity, shot through me. I burrowed deeper into the ditch, scrabbling at the earth, trying to vanish. The footsteps drew nearer, punctuated by a low, tuneless whistle that scraped along my nerves. "Don't you make this difficult," the man continued, his tone disturbingly conversational, almost amiable. "Been watching you a few days now. Waiting. You're careful, gotta give you that. But everyone slips up sooner or later." My blood turned to ice water. Days? Flashes ignited behind my eyes. A dark truck idling at distant gas stations. A fleeting reflection of a man watching me in a diner mirror. God, how blind had I been? The need to flee screamed through every cell, yet terror held me pinned. The footsteps halted directly above. I could see the scuffed toes of heavy boots inches from my face at the ditch's edge. "Found ya," he murmured, the sound soft, triumphant. A hand shot down, fingers like steel bands closing around my arm. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound, kicking and twisting as he hauled me effortlessly up the embankment. In the stark wash of his headlights, moonlight catching sharp angles, I finally saw his face. Weathered lines etched deep, eyes devoid of warmth, a cruel curve to his lips. "Let go!" I shrieked, flailing, scratching. He was immensely strong, holding me easily at arm's length while I fought like a cornered animal. "Feisty," he chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Like that. Makes it more interesting." He began dragging me towards the open door of his truck. Sickening certainty flooded me. If he got me inside that cab, it was over. Desperation lent a final surge of strength. I twisted violently in his grip, leaned in and sank my teeth into the flesh of his forearm with all the force I possessed. He roared, a sound of agony and surprise. his grip faltering for a crucial instant. I tore myself free and ran, not back towards the road, but blindly towards the gate. My fingers clawed at the cold metal bars, seeking purchase, anything to pull myself up. I'd barely scrambled a few feet when hands grasped my ankles, yanking me downwards. I kicked back wildly, blindly, a surge of feral satisfaction coursing through me as my heel connected solidly with something. His face, perhaps. He grunted, momentarily releasing his hold. Adrenaline was fire in my veins. I climbed, faster than I knew possible, scaling the chain link like a desperate spectre. Barbed wire coiled along the top tore at my palms. The pain distant, irrelevant. I flung myself over, landing heavily on the other side, the impact stealing my breath. Gasping, I lay pressed against the cool earth, ears straining against the frantic drumming of my own pulse. Silence. No pursuing footsteps, no engine revving, just the ragged whisper of my own breathing and the distant thrum of the damaged truck. Slowly, achingly, I pushed myself upright. Through the diamond pattern of the fence, I saw him. He stood beside his truck, making no move to follow. Just watching me, those chillingly empty eyes fixed on my form. "Better run, little rabbit," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the stillness, amplified by the night. "I'll be seeing you again, real soon." Then deliberately, he climbed back into his cab. The truck reversed, turned, and drove away, its taillights shrinking red embers swallowed by the vast darkness. My knees buckled. I sank to the ground, tremors shaking my entire body. A delayed reaction of shock and raw terror. Alive, escaped, but the sanctuary felt illusory. The fence merely a temporary reprieve. Stranded, bleeding, bruised, on the wrong side of a locked gate in the heart of nowhere. A single chilling thought echoed in the sudden silence. How long before he circled back to finish what he'd begun?